to address accusations and misunderstandings that the internet is a wild west where anything goes and regulators are powerless to act. At the ASA, we've been acting against irresponsible internet advertising for over 20 years, and over the last 6 years we've extended our remit to cover social media, where we're seeing some of the most high-profile challenges in relation to native advertising. We act because we believe that consumers deserve the same protection online as they do in traditional media, and because we want to support an online ecosystem where responsible advertising can flourish and where it can be trusted. On the theme of trust, the ASA's current advertising campaign highlights that people should be able to trust the ads that they see. This is especially true on the internet, where from our perspective, we're seeing far too many ads masquerading as editorial and failing to disclose their advertising nature. I'll say it now, in terms of native advertising, we're not where we need to be. My colleagues and I are using opportunities such as this to try to get greater compliance in this aspect of advertising. Here on the screen you can clearly identify a poster ad on the left and a newspaper ad on the right. You don't need a label to tell you that it's advertising because it's obvious from the context. But the context isn't always obvious and so clear online. Native advertising in particular has the potential to confuse internet users by blurring the boundaries between editorial and advertising. In these cases, it's necessary to label the content as advertising and to communicate that label to consumers in a timely and prominent fashion. Over the course of this presentation, I'll be providing you with examples of when the ASA has taken action against advertisers and publishers that have failed to identify their ads as ads. Set against other examples of harmful content on the internet, the failure to disclose advertising can seem quite trivial, but it's a practice that causes consumer detriment and erodes consumers' confidence in the ads that they see and hear. So it's important for ads to be identifiable as such. It's important for consumers because they have a right to know when they're being sold to, and they have a right to know if the content is commercially motivated. This helps consumers to understand the persuasive intent of the communication, and in that knowledge, to fairly and critically assess what they're seeing and hearing. Without this knowledge, the consumer may feel that they're receiving an honest endorsement from a person or a publisher that they trust. That's unfair and can lead consumers to take decisions that they wouldn't otherwise have taken. And ad disclosure is also important for advertisers and for publishers because building trust is better for business. The more consumers trust the advertising they see and hear, the more likely they are to respond to it. By way of background, the UK advertising self-regulatory system is over 50 years old. Today we regulate advertising across all broadcast and non-broadcast media, including TV, radio, cinema, posters, print and online, including ads and social media. We think of ourselves as a one-stop shop for advertising regulation, delivering consistent and proportionate regulation across all media and all the advertising sectors that we regulate. We are in fact two bodies, the Advertising Standards Authority and the Committees of Advertising Practice, but we both share a common purpose to make every UK ad a responsible ad, and we do that through the combination of enforcement and prevention. The ASA does the enforcing. It's the independent body that enforces rules in the UK advertising codes. The large majority of the ASA Council is made up of independent members with no current or previous association with the advertising industry, and its main role is to act on complaints from members of the public and from organisations about potentially irresponsible advertising, and it gets through quite a lot of work. In 2016, the ASA resolved nearly 30,000 complaints about 17,000 ads, with almost 3/4 of those ads relating to potentially misleading advertising and over 50% relating to online advertising. Together with its proactive and monitoring and enforcement activities, the ASA was successful in banning 4,824 ads in 2016. On the subject of today's presentation, in 2016 we received 144 complaints about 141 ads, where the main point of complaint was the alleged failure to disclose content as advertising. Complainants alleged that the content was misleading, was misleadingly presented as editorial in an attempt to hide or obscure its commercial intent. 50% of these ads relate to social media and typically to bloggers, vloggers, YouTubers and other influencers accused of endorsing products under paid instruction by the advertiser. 25% of those complaints related to direct mail, and 20% of those complaints related to websites which feature potentially undisclosed or incorrectly labelled advertising. And a small and diminishing percentage, about 5%, continue to relate to potentially undisclosed advertorial in newspapers and magazines. Sitting alongside the ASA, the Committee of Advertising Practice comprises the advertising self in self-regulation. It's comprised of organisations representing the UK's advertising, agency and media businesses, which come together to set the standards for responsible advertising. Those standards include rules on the creative content and media placement of ads, and all the standards are set out in the UK advertising codes, which cover broadcast and non-broadcast advertising. The codes include sections on misleading advertising, harmful and offensive advertising, which apply to all ads, and sections in the code. The standards set by CAP benefit from public consultation and they're subject to judicial review, so they must be based on the best possible evidence and be considered necessary. In the knowledge that prevention is the best form of regulation, we delivered over 280,000 pieces of advice and training in 2016, and we did this by making available guidance through our websites, through newsletters and webinars, by promoting e-learning modules and offering a free pre-publication advice. As a self-regulatory body, we're funded by the advertising industry through a 0.1% levy on advertising media spend and a 0.2% levy on direct marketing spend. The money is collected by a separate body at arm's length because it's important that we never know who's paying the money and how much they're paying. We don't just rely on complaints to inform our regulation. Our strategy is to have more impact by being more proactive, which requires us to consider information and intelligence from lots of different sources to identify and tackle the bigger advertising problems. For example, in 2016 we undertook research into consumers' understanding of price claims in broadband ads. The research found that people think separated pricing is confusing and misleading. We acted quickly to end this practice and produced guidance, which means that today all telecoms ads in the UK feature a single consolidated price, making it easier for everyone to understand the cost of broadband packages, including in comparison with competitor packages. Earlier this year, we also introduced new rules to ban the advertising of high-sugar food and drink products in children's non-broadcast media, bringing it into line with rules that we have in TV. This followed an evaluation of the academic evidence, an assessment of the societal and individual costs of child obesity in the UK, and insights drawn from an extensive public consultation. By helping to change the nature of food ads seen by children, we're confident that our rules will support parents and schools to improve children's relationship with food. And we recently published a report about gender stereotypes in ads. The report considered academic studies, the focus of equality in UK public policy, and the findings of ASA consumer public policy research. We concluded that more needs to be done to address harmful gender stereotypes in ads, especially those that negatively restrict how males and females see themselves and how others see them. We're now producing guidance to strengthen our regulation of gender stereotypes in advertising, including by banning ads that mock people for not conforming to gender stereotypes. We're proud to say that we tackle all of these big problems through means of self-regulation at no expense to British taxpayer, and we passionately believe that self-regulation is good for people, good for business and good for society in general, but we must remain effective if we're going to make the case for self-regulation. And in relation to the transparency of native advertising, our effectiveness in the UK is being called into question. We've banned ads, we've produced guidance, and we've spoken at seminars such as this, but we're continuing to see far too many ads failing to identify themselves as ads and hiding or obscuring their commercial intent. There are many different definitions of native advertising, but I've chosen this one, which is that native advertising is online content which resembles the publication's editorial content, but is paid for by an advertiser and intended to promote the advertiser's product. It is most commonly associated with advertorials, but native advertising also relates to vlogging, blogging, other influencer advertising, clickbait and affiliate advertising. All of these are essentially editorial forms of communication which may use the editorial style and feel of the communication to promote goods and services to their audience. That's absolutely fine and legitimate, of course, but where a brand both pays for and controls the promotional message, it's important that the audience knows they're engaging with advertising. If they don't, the audience is at risk of being misled. This slide shows the rules we maintain on the recognition of advertising, which apply to all ads in all media. But actually, the most important one and the most simple one is this. All ads must be obviously identifiable as such. The word obviously is very important because later in this presentation I'll show examples of some ads which some of you will identify immediately as ads and some of you will identify as editorial. Where there is significant doubts about the status of the content, the ASA is likely to ban the ad because it is not obviously identifiable as one. Very often ads that break these rules will also break other rules in the code. So this is an important reminder that ads must not only comply with rules on the recognition of advertising, but with all relevant rules in the code. Regulatory issues raised by native advertising are not new. For over 50 years, the ASA has considered that a reasonably circumspect person should be able to tell the difference between paid advertising and editorial content. Indeed, in our first annual report, published in 1964, before I was born, we highlighted the widespread practice of failing to disclose advertorials as such in newspapers and magazines. The ASA was not impressed by this practice, and it noted that a reader has a right to know whether he is reading independent editorial opinion or news item or advertising matter. For advertisements to appear as editorial or news matter is clearly misleading. We believe the same things apply today, but a problem that was previously confined to hard copy newspapers and magazines is now becoming a much bigger problem online. The internet has seen an explosion of different communication formats, many of which are conducive to native advertising. Unlike most other media, there are no significant barriers to entry on the internet. That means almost everyone can access the internet, and if you have the talent, you can become a publisher online. Those who are good enough or lucky enough to build an audience might also become attractive to advertisers. So online publishers can be people who work alone, sometimes operating from their bedroom or from their garage, and who clearly lack the legal and compliance resource to ensure that what they're publishing meets all the rules and regulations required of them. Recognising this, we produced this video and distributed through our social media channels in the hope of reaching those people in their bedrooms.
At the Committee of Advertising Practice, CAP, we write the rules that UK advertisers across media, including online, have to follow. If you make online editorial content, such as a blog or a blog, this video is relevant to you. When brands and content creators are considering how to work together, they need to be clear what the nature of their relationship is and how to communicate that to the viewer or reader. Here are some of the key points to remember. When is an ad an ad? If you're paid to say something about a product or service and the company tells you what to say, it's advertising. And if you're advertising, you must make that clear to followers. So, when and how should you signpost that you're advertising? If the whole video or blog is paid for and controlled by a brand, then it should be labelled upfront as an ad. Using labels such as ad feature, advertorial or similar are good ways of making followers aware before they engage with it. For example, using it in the title or thumbnail are simple ways of doing this.
So the key points to take from this video are that if an advertiser pays for and controls the content of a vlog or a blog or similar, then it's an ad. And if it's an ad, it must be obviously recognisable as an ad. That means if it's not clear from the overall context, it must be labelled as an ad. These requirements are supported and promoted by the Interactive Advertising Bureau in the United Kingdom, which is the trade association for digital advertising representing the UK's leading brands, media owners and agencies. It published research in 2014 on consumers' understanding of native advertising, which found that people's trust in brand or a publisher can diminish if the status of the content isn't clear. And importantly, it found that consumers actually benefit from visual clues to help them to better understand what they're looking at. Consumers like to see a prominent brand logo, ideally at the top of the content. They like to see clear labelling, and they like to see the use of on-screen boxing or colours to make the ad look different from the surrounding editorial. On the second of these, clear labelling, there remains some differences of opinion about the acceptability of certain words and phrases. The ASA considers that the first group of terms on screen simply and straightforwardly identify content that has been paid for and controlled by a brand. These include ad, hash ad, advert, advertising, advertisement, ad feature. But the ASA considers that the other labels are not acceptable. Hash SP, spon, sponsored by, brought to you by, with, and thanks to X for making this possible. That's because that while they suggest the content has been paid for by a brand, they also suggest, misleadingly we think, that the publisher has retained control over it, when actually it's the advertiser who has. In part, the ASA's opinion is shaped by the historical way in which brands and publishers have used sponsored to indicate that the brand has no control over the content. Ultimately, we will only know what consumers think of these terms if we actually ask them. So early next year, the ASA is going to conduct research into consumers' understanding of these terms with the intention of producing guidance by the summer. Okay, so let's look at a few examples when the ASA has acted to ban ads that fail the obviously identifiable test. We'll begin by looking at classic online article format. Okay. So this looks like a straightforward article in the motoring section of the Telegraph website. For those of you that don't know, the Telegraph is a very well-established newspaper in the United Kingdom which supports the Tory government. Bit of politics. You can see the name of newspaper at the top. You can see a headline, you can see a photo, and you can see text, which together we think resembles a type of editorial article that you would find in other parts of the Telegraph's website. The article focused on different types of tyre performance, and it claimed that Michelin tyres would always outperform budget tyres. You'll also notice the photo has a reference to Michelin tyres, and away from the article and to the right there's a label which says in association with Michelin. A reader complained to us that to the essay that this was an ad which he considered was not obviously identifiable as such. In the course of our investigation, Michelin, the advertiser, confirmed that it had both paid for and controlled the content of the ad, making it an advertisement. The ASA banned this ad because it considered that the ad was misleadingly presented as editorial, and the label in association with did not make sufficiently clear to readers that the article had been written by Michelin. Okay. This case involves BuzzFeed, which is a relatively new entrant to the market and is already competing with traditional newspapers like the Tory Daily Telegraph for audience share. On the face of it, this looks like a light-hearted article about dirty laundry, which lists 14 photos and descriptions about dirty laundry. Personally, I don't know why anyone would want to engage with this material, but I guess I'm not the target audience of it. Below the heading, text stated Dylon brand publisher, and at the bottom, text stated, "It's at times like this that we are thankful that Dylon colour catcher is there to save us from ourselves." A reader complained that this was an undisclosed ad which unfairly masqueraded as editorial. In the course of our investigation, Dylon confirmed that it had both paid for and controlled the content of the article. The ASA banned this ad because it considered that the term brand publisher did not do enough to communicate that the article in its entirety was actually an ad by Dylon. Note also the absence of boxing or colours to make the content look visually different to BuzzFeed's normal editorial content, which arguably means that the label needs to work even harder to convey the article's advertising intent. Remember, research tells us that people are using simple visual clues to make immediate decisions about the status of content. They're not playing the detective, carefully and logically investigating the status of each. Okay. Here's an example of misleading clickbait advertising. At the bottom of online articles, you'll often find references to other articles that may also be of interest to you because they cover the same or similar content. These suggestions can be useful and welcome, but complainants to the ASA felt misled when the suggestions falling under the statements "you may also like these" led to advertising for a variety of different products. You won't be surprised to hear then that the ASA banned these ads because the statement did not adequately convey the advertising status of the material. It's not acceptable for consumers to be misleadingly directed to ads on the false understanding that they're engaging with editorial. They must know before they engage with the ad that it is an ad. Social media is also responsible for some of our most high-profile work in this area, because news media in the UK like to report on cases involving celebrities and a relatively young and potentially vulnerable audience. This is an Instagram post by a makeup blogger called Shake Beauty promoting a product called Flat Tummy Tea. She's posted a photo of herself holding the product and added the comments, at Flat Tummy Tea, 20% off guys. If you've been following me, you'll know I use this and I genuinely feel less bloated. I don't know how many of you know the word bloated, it's an interesting bloated, and a flatter tummy. Oh yes. The ASA banned this ad for not clearly featuring the term hash ad or a similar description which would have clearly communicated that the brand both paid for and controlled the content of the post. Remember, if a vlogger wants to personally endorse a product because she genuinely likes it and wants to recommend it to her followers, that's absolutely fine. I often recommend films and books to my friends on social media, but I don't need to label the recommendations as an ad because no one's paying me or controlling the message. And here are two other examples on Twitter. On the left, a tweet from the account of AJ Adudu, a television presenter, and on the right, a tweet from the account of Wayne Rooney, probably the only good football player that England has produced over the last 10 years. And he's not even that good. Adudu highlights Alpro as her favourite summer snack, and Wayne Rooney highlights Nike in his quest to start the year as a champion and end it as a champion. Neither told their followers that the brands had paid for and controlled the message of the ad, so the ASA banned these ads, causing reputational damage to the advertisers and to the celebrities. And of course, all of this could have been avoided if they simply included the term hash ad or similar in the tweets. Now we're going to see a YouTube video featuring two vloggers, Emma Blackery and Luke Cutforth. In the video, Emma says statements like, "I was contacted by the guys at Oreo and they have sent me some of their new biscuits, and Oreo have asked us to do a lick challenge." So here's an extract from it.
Hey guys, I'm here with Anna Blackberry.
Emma Blackberry.
Whatever, and we're here to do an Oreo lick race, which I'm we're excited about. So, Ella, what are the rules to an Oreo lick race?
Okay, so the first person to twist it, lick it, dunk it, eat it, and drink it wins the race.
Okay, so you lick it, twist it.
No, you twist it, then you lick it.
Okay, so you twist it, lick it, throw it.
No!
What? Okay, so you twist it, lick it, drink
No,
it.
you eat it first.
You eat the milk.
What?
Twist it, lick it, dunk it, eat it, pop it, pull it.
No!
What? Okay, so when we play the C chord. Ooh.
No, you're licking the wrong side. That's not better.
Okay, so I mean, these publishers are quite literally working from their bedroom. Again, the content was very much in keeping with the vlogger's normal editorial content. In the ASA's opinion, statements such as "thanks to Oreo for making this video possible" were not sufficiently clear to clarify that Oreo had controlled the content of the video. So whilst there was a large number of references to Oreo throughout the video, they were not sufficient to identify the material as advertising, and so the ASA banned it. And here's a screenshot of a YouTube channel called Beauty Recommended, which is typically shortened to BR and featured in the opening titles of the uploaded videos and in the thumbnails of the videos on the right. The videos themselves have actually been promoted by Procter & Gamble. In this case, P&G thought that by labelling the content as BR and by stating "brought to you by Procter & Gamble," this was sufficient to inform the audience that Procter & Gamble both paid for and controlled the videos themselves. The ASA disagreed with this and told P&G to clearly and unambiguously identify these ads, including by using more appropriate labels. This and the previous case indicate that native advertising is undertaken by some of the world's biggest companies, boasting some of the best legal and compliance departments in the world. So whilst people in bedrooms might not have great legal and compliance departments, you certainly do. They surely cannot have any excuse for hiding and obscuring the advertising nature of their communications. And finally, an outrageous example of totally irresponsible affiliate advertising. Affiliate advertising is a type of performance-based marketing in which a business rewards one or more affiliates for each visitor or customer brought to the business by the affiliate's own marketing efforts. In this case, the affiliate authored the report on the website www.casinohack.com. It was presented as a news article and tells the story of a man called William whose wife had cancer. In order to pay for her treatment, William had to sell his house, and he eventually found himself in £130,000 worth of debt. The report ends happily, however, after William stumbled on the gambling site 888.com, which changed his financial fortunes. As you might have guessed, this is not a true story, but a grossly irresponsible ad for 888.com. It not only fails to inform the reader that the report is an ad, but it breaks almost every rule in the book, including that gambling advertising must not exploit the financially vulnerable. In the UK, we hold the advertiser and the affiliate responsible for these ads, so it's vitally important for brands that operate affiliate programs to put in place adequate systems of control to ensure that their affiliate ads meet the required standards. As you might imagine, the reputational damage caused to 888.com has been absolutely huge. And that's the risk that brands and publishers take if they fail to meet the requirements of the codes. In the UK, ASA decisions are very often reported in the national press, and impact on consumer trust and commercial performance can be significant. We've actually seen examples of company share prices fall following the publication of ASA rulings. It's an old adage, but it's a true one. It takes years and years to build your brand reputation, and it takes a minute to destroy it. It pays for advertisers to ensure that they comply with the codes and advertise responsibly. And as I said at the start of my presentation, when it comes to native advertising, we're seeing far too many ads masquerading as editorial and failing to disclose their advertising nature. As such, it should come as no surprise that we're now seeing the state regulators, like the Federal Trade Commission in America and the Competition and Markets Authority in the United Kingdom, taking enforcement action against undisclosed influencer endorsements. At the moment, we're working within existing legislation and regulations to ensure ads are obviously identifiable as such. But if we continue to see such widespread and high-profile non-compliance, we may see much stronger legislation and regulations come into play, which would unfairly penalise all of you who play by the rules. I'm assuming, of course, that you all do play by the rules. All of the examples I've shown relate to advertising targeted at a predominantly adult audience, but we've recently responded to concerns about native advertising targeting young children. Research tells us that children aged 11 or younger may lack the critical faculty to distinguish advertising content from editorial content, especially where the ad resembles the surrounding content. This immersive type of advertising can frustrate the child's ability to recognise advertising and to understand the content is trying to sell them something. In these circumstances, our guidance calls for enhanced disclosure. For example, for long-form advertising directed at under 12s, the guidance calls on vloggers to go beyond the normal levels of disclosure required for general audience and to spell out in words or sound that the video was paid for by a named product. These labels or statements should be prominent and be used clearly and used in easy to understand language appropriate for primary school children to help them recognise the persuasive intent of the content. The guidance also highlights internet display ads which take a similar form to the surrounding content. Where these ads are directed at under 12s, the guidance calls on brands to work harder to inform the child audience about the commercial nature of the communication. The guidance suggests using a label like ad or advertisement feature together with prominent and recognisable branding in a manner which helps the child to distinguish the ads from the surrounding editorial content. Of course, most of our regulatory actions are targeted at advertisers, publishers and others involved in the process of making and distributing ads, but we also play a role in supporting children's media literacy. We provide information to schools to inform children about the protection that they're entitled to expect from the advertising regulator, and we tell them about the advertiser's responsibility to make sure they're marketing to children fairly and responsibly. In this way, we hope the next generation of young adults are better equipped to hold advertisers to account, including by demanding and expecting open and honest disclosure in their marketing activities. This slide leaves you with a checklist of good practice in native advertising. As I said, you must label an ad if it's not clear from the context that it is an ad. You must place that label up front and before a person engages with the ad. It's not acceptable to reveal the advertising nature of the content 1 or 2 clicks away from the original content, and the label must be sufficiently prominent. Use labels that convey clearly that a brand has both paid for and exercised control over the content, for example by using the terms ad or #. Don't use terms that imply the publisher retains control and comply with all the relevant rules in the code. If the content of the ad or its media placement is irresponsible, the reputational damage to your brand may be significant. If you want further information on how to comply with the codes, you can follow us on Twitter, sign up to our Receive Account newsletters, or actually just follow Autocontrol on Twitter and newsletters. Guidance specific, and we also have, okay, I think we're towards it. So as I say, we have very specific guidance on bloggers and bloggers as well, and that's it. Thank you very much.